Great. Hi, everyone. Warm welcome to this panel on AI and trust. Warm welcome to all of you in the audience. Warm welcome to the panelists. It's an honor to be with you all today and to be with you as you guide us through the topic of AI and trust. So let's kick off. Firstly, I would like to introduce that AI is this transformational opportunity with business potential across all parts of life, all sectors of business, and all geographies. And like all business opportunities, it needs a foundation of trust. So to the panel, please could you introduce yourself and share what AI and trust means to you? So maybe Pia, kick us off.
Super happy to start. Hello, everybody. My name is Pia Tischhauser. I'm actually born here in Switzerland, so this is being home. I'm a senior partner and managing director at BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and I also sit on the board of Swiss Re Group. So maybe starting on the topic, I actually would like to quote a study that we as BCG actually launched just here with the World Economic Forum, and it talks about responsible AI. And responsible AI speaks about how can we ensure that corporates embed trust and instill trust with their consumers. And it starts really with three things. First of all, it starts with awareness at top management level. And what we found at the study, while 84% of top executives say this is the priority, one of the top three priorities for them, only 14% actually have to date the regulations and the governance in place to actually really have a responsible AI in their organization. So I think being aware on where corporates are, being transparent around where corporates are. And then with many things in the corporate world, I think we need to make sure that we have a human-centric approach to AI. So how can we really make sure that in everything we do, we have, all sets of customers, everybody in mind, so that we actually can reduce and ideally eliminate some of the biases that we have. And I think last, I also would like to think about it in a stakeholder way, right? Also, how do we make sure that we also bring employees on that journey? And when we look at the study, I think when we talk about Gen AI and we're all getting excited on what it actually can do, that's 10% of the challenge. How do we embed it in the technology organizations have? It's another 20%. But really 70% of the challenge is how do we help employees? How do we help them reskill, upskill? How do we fundamentally change the way we actually produce stuff? We need to reimagine kind of almost every process at an organization, and I think that's the major challenge. So with that, I'd like to open. Thanks for having me.
Lovely. Lots to unpack there. So Keith, AI and trust, what does it mean to you?
Well, first, Keith Strier, Vice President of Worldwide AI Initiatives at NVIDIA. You may have heard of us, a small semiconductor company.
Very small.
Very small. Just a fly-by-night. Well, actually, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank Christoph and Swisscom for inviting us to be here in this magical building. AI House is really incredible. My first impression of it yesterday was it felt like all these atoms were just banging into each other, kind of, and we were kind of physically banging, but it was like this incredible chemical reaction of ideas and people and personalities. So it's a really cool place. Now I'm not born in Switzerland, but I did just discover Rubella. So I'm pretty keen on it. So I even brought it with me. So I will take that back, a little piece of Switzerland with me. So AI and trust, I think, actually, I was reading through some of the World Economic Forum material, and there was a sentence in there which kind of caught my eye, which was sort of like AI's potential, basically cannot be unlocked unless people trust in its outcomes, right? Kind of a straightforward sentence, but I think there's a lot of truth in that. And at NVIDIA, because we're sort of at the center of this incredible explosion that's happening right now. We get this steady stream of case studies and examples of how our customers and our partners are taking advantage of computing and AI to solve really big problems, whether from genomics all the way through to space travel. And so, I see this incredible. I see this every single day. And so, we see firsthand that AI really is going to improve the accuracy of clinical diagnostics. It really is going to make it possible to predict the early onset of disease. It's going to make cars safer. It's going to make transportation systems more efficient. It's going to make cities more resilient. We see this. We see, and I don't mean just at a high level, see very real examples across the world every single day. And so, for me, I want to see that future. I want to see that future for my 3 children. I want to see that future for all the reasons that I think everyone in this room does. But to facilitate that future, we need trustworthy AI. It's just, you can't have one without the other. So that's why this discussion is so important.
Great, thank you. Joel?
Thank you. Also, thank you for the invitation, Christoph. It was great to receive it. I'm the president of ETH Zurich since 5 years, and I will tell a little bit what happens at ETH. Many of our colleagues are here, part of this amazing, actually, week that you organize. And my anecdote with AI and trust goes back a long time, actually 10 years ago, when we decided to do an experiment. So in my former life, I built detectors and accelerators. I'm a physicist. And then we had these fantastic, developments, and I say, why don't we try to run one of our accelerator using AI? And then, when you run an accelerator, you try to have as few losses as possible. So we thought to have a straight path, very stable, was the best way. And then the AI machine came and started to make our electrons going in all directions, but the resolution was suddenly better on one spot. And so that was a wow moment. And then it took us a moment to understand what the machine was doing. And so the trust came first because it worked. You had an experiment, and you could see a benefit for ourselves, right? I think this is an important point. But the second point was until we could understand what exactly was happening and we could reproduce the mathematics that would describe this. So understanding. And that's the moment where, okay, you have the trust in what the machine is doing. Then I moved to ETH, and then we had, the first thing you do when you come to a new institution, you visit all the departments. I knew physics well, less architecture. But what I discovered is that AI was everywhere, all over the place. But nobody knew about it. So we created the AI Center 3 years ago. And 110 professors are now participating. Now the shock moment came last year. Every year we have a dialogue with each department. ChatGPT was all over the place. And then even our computer scientists started to wonder what was happening. They didn't expect that kind of speed, right? And, again, the trust question, are we really in control of? Not at all, right? So that's why I'm very happy that we addressed this question today.
Great. And Christoph?
Yeah, so I'm Christoph. Hello, everybody. I'm the CEO of Swisscom, a local telecom operator. And I think for me, trust and AI has sort of 2 components. The first one is related to data and trustworthy infrastructure. So knowing what is actually going into the model, how was it trained, why is the model giving certain answers and not another answer, sort of explainability of the model, how was it fine-tuned, who's running it, who's owning the data. And this is also why today we announced a collaboration with NVIDIA that we will build up a local Swiss-based AI infrastructure so that we give customers an opportunity to actually run their models in Switzerland and make sure that data stays in Switzerland where it's supposed to stay. And we will invest a lot of money going forward in these kind of technologies. And the second part is more related to what Pia said. I think technology is one thing, but as every technology, it has ups and downsides, and you need to use it in a responsible way. And at the end, we have customers and employees, and we need to take them on the journey. So if I just throw technology at them and they refuse it, it's kind of worthless. So making sure that our employees trust the technology and actually want to use it, and because at the end it's a huge transformation we're embarking on. So we need to find a way of making our employees believe that this is a positive change and not something negative they should fight. And the same goes for customers. If they don't accept a chatbot interface, there is no point in building it. So it needs to be built in a way that it actually services the humans and not the other way around. And I think those are the two. And often we focus very much on the tech side because that's what people get excited about. And we're all engineers and this is amazing. And it has so many data points and billions of parameters. But at the end, it's about people. And I think that's what we want to put in play now with helping our customers using these technologies in relevant use cases that actually work.
Mm.
Hey, Jennifer, I was going to suggest maybe the people in the back open up a window.
Yes.
Since it's getting a little toasty.
If you can open a window, that would be lovely. Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith.
Just a thought.
So we've heard that there are a lot of open topics that need to be addressed, right, to deliver AI and trust. We heard bias, we heard transparency, explainability, understandability, data management, copyright, etc. Now I really want to dig into what do organizations need to do in order to do this successfully? Firstly, from the business perspective. So I thought maybe Pia, you could kick us off here.
Yeah. Happy to. So I start with one that I think is at the heart or should be at the heart of every organization, being clear on what is the purpose. What is the purpose that we're trying to solve for as an organization? And I think that purpose really sets a North Star, which helps in particular also for responsible AI to making sure that whatever we do, whatever we develop, we can always check it back on that purpose. And it also helps employees, and to your point, Christoph, also clients understand why are organizations actually moving forward? Why are they trying to explore with things? And I think if we're staying true to that compass of purpose, we then also can distill it down into digestible chunks, right? Because it is a journey, and also making sure we're transparent on where are we on that journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Christoph?
Well, I think for us, we are a telecom operator. We are highly regulated by a lot of data protection and compliance laws. So for us, one of the first important building blocks is actually making sure that what we are doing complies with all those laws. Mm. And so people, they try to work around this. But I want to use ChatGPT and it's so great and it helps me. I say, okay, I understand this, but I cannot have certain type of data travel to the US and back, and then I don't know if they stay there or somebody deleted them. And so we really need to find a way first to put in place these building blocks in terms of infrastructure and running the models in a way that we are compliant with all those laws. And I think there are many other regulated industries like healthcare, banking, insurance, the military, government, which have very similar type of problems. So that's something we are focused on very heavily at the moment. And that's why we launched this initiative as well, because we noticed that a lot of our customers are struggling with exactly the same problems as it was previously in the cloud, sort of classical cloud. And then I think the other way, or the other point that seems important to me is that people will use this new technology once or twice, and if it's not working, they kind of lose trust in if it's really useful. So we tried it at home. My wife is a chemical engineer, and we used ChatGPT to ask it some chemical engineering question, and just garbage came out. So the conclusion was, this is stupid technology, it doesn't work. And I think the same is happening in the office. If people start to use Microsoft Copilot or whatever we put at their disposal, they use it once, and if it's not at least to some extent useful, they stop using it. So I think that's the next challenge, is training the models in a way that call center agents, when we give it to them, and they have a customer on the line and they enter something in their interface, what comes back from the bot as a help for the agent is actually meaningful, so they can really use it in the work. And that, I think, is moving from this POC state okay, I have something that is sort of working into fully scalable production mode and I roll it out to 2,000 call center agents, that's a pretty big step that you need a lot of time of really making sure that things are really working. And those for me are really two key ingredients that we need to tackle this year to actually deliver value beyond the nice POCs.
Mm-hmm. And can it be achieved on an organizational level only, or do we think it needs to be broader than that? You know, is it an industry collaboration as well? I mean,
yeah,
do we think?
I think you're going to see all the above. That's a great question directionally. I mean, what we're seeing in NVIDIA is that the headlines are filled with a couple of big names, right? I mean, there's ChatGPT and there's Bard and there's Claude, and so there's a few sort of big names that dominate the headlines. But actually, underneath the headlines, there are thousands of startups and hundreds of, we'll call them just mid-sized companies doing really innovative things with this technology, with large language models and their own GPTs. And then you have countries that are essentially at the country level. You have this almost imperative now to create a sovereign language model. Some countries are already doing. I mean, Sweden was the first actually in Europe to go ahead and create one, and actually covers all the Nordic languages. And many of the smaller countries who have who from a cultural preservation perspective, they need to protect their language in a way, because if everyone in the world uses some of these databases from the U.S. that they do speak all the languages. They are fluent in a sense, but not natively, and they don't necessarily catch all the nuances, all the local dialects, all the other things. And so there becomes a cultural imperative to protect the language, to make sure that it remains accessible and it's not diluted by sort of Western practices unintentionally. But so there's sort of the economic imperative, the cultural imperative, and then there's the sovereign imperative, which is there's incredible value from big technology, multinational technology companies, whether they're based in US or Europe. There's value there, there's innovation, there's investment, but there's also value in growing that capability within your borders and having sort of a balance so that you don't have a complete dependency on foreign companies for technology, services, and capabilities. So having sort of a hybrid approach and that takes time. You have to build that capability. So we see it playing out in the industry level, at the national level, all these different levels.
Perfect. And when we think about the national level, I mean, can you just sort of share with us, you see so many countries implementing this, right? I mean, how are they doing it well? Like, if you think from a national perspective, how do these countries do it well?
Well, no one's done it, at full scale, right? Again, Sweden was ahead of the curve on the language model part, but as far as this whole journey in terms of building sovereign capacity and being able to build trust into your AI ecosystem, everyone's at the early stages of that. So no one's far ahead. Europe, obviously, as a region, has taken a lead role with the EU Act, with the AI Act, and other things to really start to articulate, to create classifications and definitions and so forth. But actually, international cooperation and the harmonization of those across many countries is really going to be the trick, and that's going to take time. But there's a lot of great effort going on in that respect. So no one's done. I don't know that there's a best practice, but I think it comes down to international cooperation, multi-stakeholder engagement within countries, and ultimately public-private partnerships, which is a great example of Swisscom and others, where you have state-owned entities taking a lead role on behalf of their nation, really to move forward on this technology.
Great. And then, one of the things when we reflect on Switzerland, right, is that we think, firstly, I think of, I'm not Swiss, so I have a third-party kind of impartial perspective, I guess, maybe on Swiss. But I think of precision. And the other thing I think of is sort of consensus building, from diverse cultures and perspectives. And so the question I wanted to sort of pose to the group now is, how well positioned do we think Switzerland is as a country to kind of do AI and trust well? Maybe Joel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to take a step back, because I have the impression in the past years it's not the first time that we are confronted to this trust question. Just want to remind the COVID time, when we had a vaccine produced in no time, and still 30 to 40% of the population is refusing to get vaccinated, and we respect that. But there is apparently a fear, in the 5G technology. Swisscom was really involved in this amazing debate that was going through Switzerland, mainly the French part of Switzerland. So it tells there is something deeper ongoing than just, explaining, and so there is a fear about these technologies. There is a part of the population that is just refusing every new technology because they don't trust. Maybe they think it's a manipulation from a whatever entity. So we need to address this very carefully. Beyond, you ask, should it be just a company? No, it has to be done at the social level. Otherwise, we're going to have a big issue. And to your question, yes, Switzerland, I think, can play a special role. First, because we are not yet European, and and then we are in between the regulation that Europe is posing and the less regulated US.
Yeah.
And probably here we have a role to play to develop something. And there is another factor that I will mention later that is apparently very important. So what we have decided to do together with the EPFL in a first step is to develop a university Swiss AI system. We believe within 1 year we can get there thanks to your chips. We have 10,000 GPUs in Lugano installed, working. Not many universities have that. You just mentioned maybe 20, 30.
20, 30 entities.
Entities.
Not universities.
And so universities probably one of the few to be that. And just that you realize this is an investment of over 20 years. We did that stepwise. And now the fruits are there. And we can use that. We can position ourselves. France announced a big initiative, and I think they are talking about 1,000 GPUs. So we are already at 10,000. And you know how difficult it is to get all these electronics, all these parts, because of the world situation. So we are well positioned. We have brilliant scientists. Many are here, EPFL, ETH, and so we will kick-start this in the coming months. They are already working on some large language models. And the idea is then to open it to those who want to test and to be as transparent as possible in order to set a benchmark against commercial products. And I think then you can start to see what is happening. I mentioned there is another factor. Just before this session, I was on a session on science diplomacy. You will say it has nothing to do with, but it's very much related. How to use big data to address conflict regions, and it's not getting quieter these days. And Switzerland has the big advantage that we are still seen as a neutral country, at least by most of the countries. And so when you go into this difficult situation, you are accepted by all parties. And here we can play a special role, I believe.
Interesting. And Christoph?
Maybe I would like to rebound on what Joël said about the refusal of new technology in the population, which is an increasing concern. And I think that's why it is so important to be able to demonstrate what is the benefit of actually using a technology to employees and customers. Because if they don't see a benefit, they will just refuse it. And I think that was one of the issues we had with 5G. People said, I don't need it. And sort of, why should I put it in place? And typically, if people see a huge benefit, adoption goes very quickly. And because maybe even too quickly, and people tend to ignore the risks that actually are associated with the technology. But I think that's an important part from my perspective. But in terms of country, I think Switzerland has a great start, actually. We have amazing research facilities here with the ETH and universities. I think world-class AI research is done in Switzerland. We have, building a great ecosystem, I think, is really important, and we are part of it. I mean, the Webb is a demonstration of it. We have some of the best AI researchers were part of panels this week in the AI House, which are here at the Webb. We have great links with international companies like NVIDIA or other technology companies, which are necessary to actually build something also from a local perspective. What is important for me is that we are investing more in the startup world, because a lot of the innovation happening in the AI field is done by startups and not by big corporates. So ensuring that this sort of startup ecosystem in Switzerland is vibrant, has enough cash to scale, is an important topic that we are working on as well to ensure that these companies stay here. And then I think the last point is this local sovereign infrastructure, that we are not always dependent on some American company providing some cloud infrastructure, then we use it, and then at the end we lose control and we are not sovereign anymore. And that's why I think initiatives like the Swiss AI initiative of DTH or our own initiative building or providing this for our customers is so important for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add one factor where, of course, a university is predestined is education. And that's why we have decided that we will have throughout all 16 departments, so including the social science, the economics, the natural science, the engineering, of course, we will have computer education, computer skills educated. Doesn't mean everyone can, program, but at least understand how the logic is of what we are doing, so that when you are confronted with these technologies, you have an idea of what is happening. Now, of course, we don't educate all Switzerland, okay? So the step will be necessary to go all the way. In Switzerland, we have a fantastic dual education system with still close to 80%, 75 to 80% do vocational education. And how to penetrate also this part, because you mentioned it, the reskilling will be happening also at this level. Today there was an article for Switzerland, 50% of the jobs will have to be changed in the next years, which is an enormous endeavor. And so we need to find a way to work together and in hand all the education that is provided, at least in Switzerland, on this topic. Otherwise, we are going to face quite some serious issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a great segue to the kind of sort of macro context we all operate in, right? The kind of policy framework that we are existing within and operating within. I just wondered, could you share some perspectives? The policy environment is very diverse globally. Maybe you could share some insights on that to kick us off.
Yeah, without naming names, saying specific countries, it is a patchwork of approaches across the world, right? Definitely, the more west you go, the more that both the national AI strategies and the political dialogue is focused more on trust and responsibility, which is a good thing. But there's also sort of there are camps that want to focus more on risk and harm, and less on opportunity. And again, that's just there's a diversity of views on that. When we like that. The more east you go and across the world, you see a lot more focus on AI as an opportunity to turbocharge the economy. There's still desire to have policy frameworks that protect society, and there's no lack of acknowledgement of the harms, but it isn't the driving dialogue. It's more opportunity first, and let's manage the risk versus. This is really risky. Let's make sure we protect society, and the opportunity can come second. So there's definitely different viewpoints across the world, but we are at the early stages of a global regulatory framework. Everyone is still we're still kind of in that awkward teenage phase where you're trying to figure things out, like the ones screaming outside windows. It isn't clear, but I think there is clarity and unity. Including, quite frankly, this was accomplished in the UK at the UK Global AI Summit, with more than a dozen countries, including China, signed sort of a common view. on the need to come together and coalesce around the risks and the needs to protect humanity. I mean, no one really disagrees with that, but the method is to do it, and and the steps and the priorities, those vary. And so I think whether it's Washington or London or Brussels or any other capital, there's still work to be done. So and whether university doing research or a company, you have to operate in that environment. And that's complicated, right? Because you have to take uncertainty as part of that journey, and I think that's right. You must be advising companies.
Yeah, and I think actually maybe that's a good segue, right? We sometimes have companies that look at all the regulations and they ask us, well, how do we interpret this, right? And they kind of want to stand still and say, well, we wait until the governments have figured it out and then we act. And this is just a shout out. There is not time to just wait, right? Because I think there is an important learning process, and I think therefore organizations, corporates, I think we're all in this together. We cannot just wait because it will never be done, right? The regulation. Yeah. So it's an evolving process, and therefore I think it's very important to really go back and try to understand what are we trying to solve with the regulations, but not wait for regulations to actually regulate, but actually take important steps. And I just maybe want to add one thing, Christoph, you mentioned about innovation, right, and how important it is. I think being Swiss, we've been extremely proud over all the years when we looked at the innovation reports that we're the most innovative country in the world. And I think we're really at a tipping point where with AI, I would say the sources on what it takes to innovate are fundamentally changing. And I think it will play out in the next years. What are actually the countries that will be at the top of that lead table? And for me, it's not a given that Switzerland actually will stay on top of that lead table. And I know you're working very hard, Joël, with ETH and EPFL and so forth, but I think it starts, right? It starts early. It starts with primary school. It starts with the mindset also. And I think it's a big opportunity, but I think it's also a threat for us, speaking as a Swiss, to actually stay at the top in terms of innovative countries.
Mm. And do we think we kind of have the policy ingredients for success, or how would you reflect on that?
I'm not so optimistic when I see the speed at which Swiss politics takes decision. It takes years until something is established and actually implemented. And very often, we vote on everything in Switzerland. So if there is this part of the population that is building counter forces, then it can become really, really difficult. And we are so depending on what's happening elsewhere. So I think it's our responsibility, universities, companies, to set some kind of standards. And maybe we work with those who are following these standards. It would be interesting to look at how the regulation in the pharma industry, in the medication industry started. It wasn't there at the beginning, and then they realized, okay, if everyone produces a chemical, it might not be so healthy. And so probably they self-regulated before the true regulation came. And I believe putting some kind of labels, or it's something the companies and the research universities can develop together. Yeah, it seems to be for me the better path than just waiting for politics to tell us what should be done. And the risk is that they take decisions that are counterproductive also, and then we have in other cases just forbidden to use some technologies, and that's not good either, because there will be always ways to go around, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to just build off something you said about not waiting. So ChatGPT came out in November, right, of 2022. Mm-hmm. And my colleague Sebastian, are you here, Sebastian? My colleague Sebastian from VDE, we were together just 2 weeks later. In early December, I was in the Canary Islands as part of the OECD Digital Ministerial, which only happens like once every 5 years. So it was just well-timed that it just happened to be right then. So all the digital ministers of Europe were together in the Canary Islands. And it was only 2 weeks after ChatGPT, and this is the only thing they want to talk about. Mm. I mean, it was in the opening keynote. It was in every room. and I mean, it happened fast, really, really fast. And so I think about the world as sort of pre-ChatGPT and post-ChatGPT. And post-ChatGPT, if you don't get it, if you're thinking you can wait, you're going to drop off the map. Now, in companies and universities, countries, they all have different struggles. They all have different timelines. Everyone can't move fast. Get it? But there is a mindset approach, right? And the building of that 10,000 GPU system, right? That is gigantic. And the amount of years and capabilities you had to build and both financial and human resources to get to that's an incredible advantage, right? Incredible strategic advantage now in the execution of your educational mission and science and so forth. I mean, that is not easily replicated. So these things take years, really, to build all the foundations. And so it's if you're waiting, there'll be I think there's and I say this to countries, I say this to heads of state, which is the prosperity and security of your nation requires you to take action, because otherwise your legacy will be that you did not build the new critical infrastructure necessary to compete in this economy, and that will be a footnote on that's a true. I mean, I think that's true for deans. I think it's true for heads of state. I think it's true for CEOs. I think it's just the new truth. Post ChatGPT.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, totally agree. I think if you don't use AI in the future, you will just disappear. You will not be competitive in any way anymore. Doesn't matter in which industry you are. And because your cost of production will be way too high, or you will be outcompeted by people that can produce 10 times faster and cheaper and better. And I think that's many industry leaders did not yet realize that sort of what is really going on and how critical this is also from a country perspective to remain competitive and innovative. And now I think from a company perspective, I can wait for policy to appear on a country level and regulation, and then I'll probably be grey and retired before this happens, at least in Switzerland. So I think industry leaders are well advised to think about the policy framework internally within the company, because if people start using these technologies without guidance and without control, not only good things will come out of it. So, and damage will be done at the customer front, or you will have data leaks or breaches, and that's not somewhere you want to go. I think and especially as an operator, one of our values is trustworthiness. So we really want to make sure that we use technology in a way that is acceptable to society. And I mean, we don't have an AI policy yet, but we are currently working to finalize it. So to really provide our employees with guidance, what is actually acceptable, and where are sort of the red lines that we don't want to cross. And in absence of having this, we have sort of an ethical board in place where every use case needs to be signed off, so that we can make sure that people don't go sort of astray, doing things that we don't want to do from a company perspective. And I think that's a really important aspect, waiting for maybe larger policy frameworks to pop up on a country level.
If I may, also in a university, these large language models are used. And we made a survey at ETH. 10% of our professors are using it. 100% of the students are using it. So it's about how you cope with that. So we are engaging in this situation, and we decided to do with the technology, and not against. For example, there are fantastic examples where they take the lecture and then the AI raise questions to prepare the students for the upcoming exams. I mean, this is a great example. We had interviews, and so that's the positive side. Now, how to control that during the exam they don't look for the questions. Another anecdote: so some of our professors had the exams passed, and then let the ChatGPT do the exam, and it passed also not very brilliantly with 4.1. The limit is 4.0, but then you think about changing the way you do the exam. So we are thinking about all this at the moment.
And I think the necessity of policy, that's not a bad thing. Every new technology creates new risks, and for example, now we have the right to forget, or that I can ask for deletion of my data. That was not an issue 20 years ago because storage was so expensive and so limited. Yeah. Nobody stored enough data. Now it has become ubiquitous and cheap. So everybody stores everything. So it creates new challenges. We solve them and then we move on. And AI is exactly the same. It creates new problems and then we solve them with new policy frameworks and then we can move on again.
Fantastic. Well, look, I want to move us to the final sort of phase of the panel. We've heard that AI is relatively new. November 2022 was a seminal moment. It's changing very quickly, and it's also exponential. And so it's forcing us all to kind of operate in a very uncertain way. And so final thoughts from you. How do organizations do this well? For all of the execs in the room, how do they do this well? Parting thoughts. I mean, maybe I'll start this time with Christoph.
Sorry.
Can I offer you some Rubella?
My cough I have since 6 weeks. But I think it's a question of like trying to run as quickly as possible, but not start too fast or like don't get out of the blocks too quickly. So you need to put in place some of the basic things that we talked about in terms of policy compliance, so to make sure that no accidents happen. But afterwards, from my perspective, it's a lot about trying and learning because nobody knows how this really can be used in the right way and what, maybe in 3 years we will do something very differently than we do today. So, but you need to provide the test bed or production bed to employees that they can actually try and learn in a safe way. And that's what we are focused on at the moment.
Okay.
I think for us, the focus, of course, research, we will continue. We have launched the Swiss AI initiative. We will continue to push with that. At some point, when we really are well aligned to ETHs, then we will go open to all universities in Switzerland and to our industry partners. But so that's running, and that's one way on the research side. But for me, the focus will be very much on the teaching, on the learning side, because that will have an impact on next generation. And how we are going to do that, we are still doing experiments. I say very often, ETH altogether, students and the researchers, we are 40,000, so it's a small city in Switzerland. And we can do demonstration, and maybe it's useful for the society globally.
I think one of the cornerstones of trust is literacy, and AI literacy is definitely one of the critical layers here. I think Europe has done a particularly good job, particularly Finland, with its elements of AI course that has propagated across the continent and really across the world, I think. So there's been some really good examples here, but globally, AI literacy is a huge problem. And it's a problem in companies, it's a problem, the lack of trust often is grounded in the lack of understanding. And it is what it is. I mean, it's a complicated technology. It's a scary technology if you don't really understand it. I'm not an engineer, so I don't think of it in engineering terms. I think of it in functional terms. What it is, what does it do, what doesn't it do, what does it do well. And in some respects, we will not be able to tackle the political challenges or the institutional or enterprise challenges until we have a higher level of AI literacy. And I think that's something all countries are struggling with, frankly. I mean, in Switzerland, I read that 99% of all registered businesses are small, medium enterprises, so of 250 employees or less, right? So of course, you have the big multinational companies from Nestle to Roche, and they have the resources to tackle that issue, but you've got thousands of small enterprises that have to tackle that within their company, and so I think that's a big issue, and it's an issue in the U.S. as well. I mean, it's an issue everywhere. So I think AI literacy is something that we all have to play a role in if we're going to ever achieve that.
So maybe building on the AI literacy, I would say for companies, it's really transparency, right? It's transparency on where does AI play a role in product development. How does AI actually help take business decisions and be clear on where was AI being used? And then I think the big challenge I mentioned at the beginning, and maybe just leaving that 10, 20, 70, again I mentioned at the beginning, so the 10, the algorithm, the 20, how do we connect it with the tech? But I think the 70, how do you really make sure we can reskill, upskill, entirely kind of the entire workforce, right? And how do we make sure we really just, not just implement it as an add-on, because then we're not getting the benefits, but how do we really reimagine the way we're doing business?
Fantastic. So thank you so much to all the panelists for guiding us through AI and trust. Thank you to the audience, and see you next time.